episode.
When I was governor of Minnesota, we did a massive study on voter fraud, and it isn't there. It's a red herring. There isn't any massive voter fraud that goes on. So why the need to fix everything and why to do all these things? I don't know. I think it's to disenfranchise people and stop people and making voting difficult, which it should not be. The only voter fraud you're going to see will come from these electronic voting machines, where the fraud can be done with massive amounts of numbers. That's what you have to watch out for. There's no criminals out there every November when voting comes around saying, let's organize people and send hundreds to the polls to commit voter fraud. I mean, that's laughable. You know, but that's it's totally a red herring that they throw out there for the reason they just want to make voting more difficult, because the more difficult they make voting means less people vote. And it's that simple. Smaller numbers are easier to control.
Absolutely amazing point. If we only focus just as much on election fraud than voting fraud, which is the real issue here. And Greg Palast just did a 6-month investigation at Al Jazeera. Basically, he found that GOP-led efforts to purge voter rolls basically will disenfranchise up to 3.5 million people for things that, like being registered in 2 different states at once. I mean, that's a common occurrence if someone moves. It's not a real indication of fraud here. Jesse, how do you think this purge will affect independent candidates for the midterms?
Well, all independent candidates in this country don't have a chance anyway, because the 2 parties make the rules. You know, they never get along with each other except when it comes time to crush down any third entity. Then they will team up together and be the best of buddies at that point. But I stand now, Abby, we have to change everything in this country. We need to abolish political parties altogether. Get rid of them. Make them political action committees. And you know how you could start? You could start at the local level, because I always pose this question. Why do we put political parties on the ballot? Why not just the candidate's name?
Yeah,
There's no reason, you know, and that way the voter has to educate themselves. What does John Smith stand for? See, now they make it so it's for the parties. If you're liberal, you walk in and look for Democrat. You don't need to know who it is. You look for Democrat. If you're conservative, you look for Republican. You don't even need to know who the candidate is. Let's remove political parties and just put candidates' names down. Then it forces the people to educate themselves, or they have to simply go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which I would rather have that. I would rather have that than the current state of our politics in America today, with these political action committees and the buying and selling and these. How about these despicable ads, Abby?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch these TV ads. They make me want to throw up. You'd think the opponent should be put in prison. Well, being it's a Democrat and Republican, that may be accurate. Maybe they both do belong in prison.
Right. You said it yourself. I mean, in your book, it is absurd, Jesse, but I feel like, this is talking about putting a lot of responsibility on voters, and I shudder to think if they had to actually take time to find out who the candidates really are. I have to bring up this recent poll, too. Yeah, go on.
Well, do you know why they need to? Here's why. If you're like me, I work 5 days a week, and the government takes 2 to 2.5 days of my pay. They take it in taxes. Half of my work. Isn't that compelling enough to make people pay attention? You've got this entity that takes 2.5 days of your 5 days' fruits of your labor. If you count property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, taxes upon the taxes.
Yeah, Jesse, what kills me is people who say, I'm just not political, I'm not into that, as if it's a hobby like cars. And you're like, do you realize that everything you do on a daily basis is political? All of it's affected by what you could be participating in. The government is in every facet of your life. You ought to pay attention to what they're doing with your money. I do, and that's why I'm called a rebel. Yeah. This recent poll, Jesse, it's going right along with what you're saying. It shows that 75% of working class Americans feel they're being held back by the cost of living. 45% think they'll never get their finances back to how they were before the 2008 crisis. What do you think it will take to get the working class to become politically active if they're just focused on surviving day to day?
Well, the battle is this. They're destroying unions. Unions are being destroyed. And unions do have their faults. Anything can be corrupted. But the union created the middle class. And I've said this for decades now. As the unions go, so go the middle class, because that's the collective bargaining. You know, everybody talks about minimum wage, right? Minimum wage. I've come out on the other end. I've said we need to have a maximum wage. And it's, wait a minute, this isn't some socialist communist idea Jesse Ventura's come up with. It's already implemented in professional sports. Every football, baseball, basketball, and hockey all have salary caps where the players can only make so much money. Now, they make a lot of money, but they can only make so much. It's capped off. It's time we bring salary caps to the CEOs of these corporations. And if somebody can't live